Welcome to this special broadcast where we're talking about the big story of the day, the impact that you've seen on Adani Group stocks, and of course standard disclaimers over here, as well as the news flow that has come in. So we're going to start by breaking down what has really happened today, and this is what is interesting, Sajid, because you've seen a lot of media coverage and impact on the Adani Group stocks. In fact, reactions from rating agencies, etc., reacting to the media coverage on a case in the US court, Brooklyn court, brought by the Department of Justice and then the SEC, of course. But today the statement that has come out from Adani Green becomes very, very important, because they're saying that there's no charge against Gautam Adani, Sagar Adani and Vneet Jaain under FCPA. Let's start by understanding what this means.
You know, if you look at what Adani Green has said, is that there is an indictment that has happened in the US, and that is resulting from a case of Azure Energy, where the SEC and DOJ are investigating into it, and as part of the investigation...
That's because Azure Energy was listed in the US markets.
Yes, because FCPA only comes into play when you're listed there or your securities are listed there. So that's how it began.
So FCPA's Foreign Corrupt Practices Act,
basically,
which stops or acts against any corruption
or
which
bribery
is done
by companies or securities listed in the US in other jurisdictions.
Okay.
So a lot of foreign companies have got stuck in that, because many of them are in emerging market countries, and you have all those issues which are coming. But as part of that investigation is where the name of Gautam Adani, Sagar Adani and Vneet Jaain came into the picture, and the press release which came out from the US DOJ mentioned them in one go, saying that they've been indicted for charges which includes bribery and corruption and other securities fraud. Now, what Adani Green has said in the thing, in the disclosure made to the stock exchange and the group which has come out with a press release, that there are no bribery charges or corruption charges against either Gautam Adani, Sagar Adani or Vneet Jaain. And they have said that if you look at the 5 counts, which is now it's an indictment, so it's just like a charge sheet in India. So they give you on what are the sections under which you're booking them, right? So there are 5 counts under which all the people have been, all the defendants have been booked. On that, 2 major ones are the count 1, which is violation of FCPA regulation, and the count 5, which is obstruction of justice. These 2 major counts does not have the name of Gautam Adani, Sagar Adani or Vneet Jaain.
So one sec. So what are they then accused of? Let me put that also out there so that people understand. The first accusation is an alleged securities fraud conspiracy, alleged wire fraud conspiracy, and alleged securities fraud. So if you compare this to in how serious it is to an FCPA, it's completely chalk and cheese. So it's not as serious at all.
So when we talk about FCPA violation, when we talk about obstruction of justice, you have the DOJ coming into play.
These are criminal
indictments which is there. But when you start talking about conspiracy, which is securities fraud conspiracy or wire fraud, or securities fraud, then you have the SEC coming into play into that, and these become then civil monetary penalty issues.
So these are civil charges, not criminal charges. That is one important distinction that we need to remember while looking at it. Also, the criminal charges, which is FCPA and obstruction of justice, are against Azure and that Canadian investment fund.
So the investigation started with Azure based on whistleblower complaint. And then, as part of the investigation, it got extended to Canadian pension fund, which is CDPQ, because CDPQ was the largest investor in Azure, and the representative was also the chairman of Azure. So that's how both the entities and officials came into the picture of FCPA. So that's the main contention, that these charges are not against any of the Indian officials or directors of Adani Green.
Okay, so now you're wondering why we are telling you all of this. Look at what has happened with Adani stocks this morning, and if you had watched NDTV Profit this morning, you would have seen Vneet Bolinchkar coming in at close to 8:40 in the morning and saying go long on Adani. Remember, we are not giving you any recommendations here, nor are Sajid and I, but we are just trying to give you a sense of why this has made a difference and not other points that have been made through the last few days. So why is the market seeing this differently? The reason that the market is seeing this differently is simply because this removes the criminal charge tag which was misrepresented, misreported on the promoters of the group. In fact, that's the question that we've got from one crazy crux. Hi, and thank you for writing in, saying any impact on Adani stocks. So we can just tell you fundamentally what the change is. No stock recommendations here, let me make that clear once again. But what this changes is that you no longer have a direct charge of bribery or corruption against Gautam Adani, Sagar Adani, Vneet, Jaain, which was what was concerning investors in the Adani Group.
That's right. And from an investor's point of view, criminal indictment is seen as a negative. But if you have those, minor civil penalties or charges which SEC puts in, then it's a minor one, and it can be corrected either through settlement or any other processes. But coming to the question of the kind of losses which we have seen, now Adani Group has said that the losses were to the tune of $55 billion, and I was looking at the numbers since Tuesday evening. Wednesday was a holiday for us, and and Wednesday night is when the US DOJ indictment was uploaded to the website, right? So Thursday and Friday was impact for Adani stocks. The entire 11 to 12 companies which are part of the group have lost almost 2.5 lakh crores
In market
cap. Today what we have seen is a lot of short positions that got built up over the last 2 to 3 days. It's getting squared up, and as a result of which we are seeing lighter open interest which is coming in, and the stock going up. So we've seen Adani Energy is up nearly 10%. We have Adani Green which is in positive. So almost all Adani companies are in positive and have bounced back from the lows, and a gain of market cap around 60-70,000 crores is what we have seen as of today or as we speak.
Okay, so this is important to note, which is where you're seeing a reversal. And again, we're not telling you whether you should buy, whether you should not buy. That is not what we're doing. We're just trying to give you an insight on what is happening in it. And there's some queries asking about that also. I'll repeat the disclaimer again, because Vishal Talreja is asking this question. That you're watching NDTV Profit. This is part of the Adani Media Group, but we're stating the facts to you, and then of course it's up to you to come to whatever conclusion you may have. Another question is, my portfolio has Adani stock, so what next now? Now this is something that you can hear all of our experts coming and saying on screen, on air. They've talked about it, and since we talked about Vneet Bulanjkar, I just got off a show with him, Sajid. So he's saying that the overhang remains unless this case remains. So even though there is a bounce back today, from an investment perspective, till the case remains, that will be a bit of an overhang. But look at 2 or 3 other factors that Abizar Devanji, for example, senior lawyer, has come up and said that when you have this kind of a civil case under securities fraud, etc., companies usually settle them in court because they don't want this overhang on business. And there are several large companies in the past that have faced similar cases, such as Airbus.
Airbus is there, Glencore is there, you have Walmart,
SAP.
SAP. Even Cognizant has done that for some of the, I think at least a few years back. That's some of the examples which are there. But on a fundamental basis, if you look at how September or the first half of FY25 ended, you had strong cash flows coming in from the Adani Group portfolio, and that's as per the presentation available on the website of stock exchanges. So, and good profitability, strong cash flows, debt to EBITDA to debt level are 2.5 times, which is much more comfortable. The cash in books or cash flows are enough to take care of multiple quarters of debt repayment, and it's much lighter as compared to the debt is much lighter as compared to what it was pre-Hindenburg.
Yeah.
So, and from that point of view, fundamentally, it has been able to deleverage its balance sheet a lot, and the operations of many of the infra companies have started generating enough cash flows for companies to sustain going forward. So, if, in one of the reports I was reading that even if I think GQG mentioned as part of the memo to investors that even if Adani is not able to raise funds immediately because of this overhang, their cash flows are enough to run the operations.
So, from an investor perspective, what should you be looking at? Because a lot of these companies are in the infrastructure business, high capital intensive businesses, long gestation period, right?
Yeah.
When you're building hardcore infrastructure, you don't finish this in a few months. It's
these are 20
years,
30
decades.
Assets,
Right.
which generate cash flows over a period of
Over
time.
a period of time. And they're very closely aligned. A lot of these projects are very closely aligned with India's overall infrastructure plans,
And
with,
story, yeah.
with private capex, with the entire story. So you have to look at it in context of that as well.
That's true.
So from an investor perspective, what do you need to see? You have to see if an infrastructure company, and frankly any infrastructure company, has enough funding flow for these large capital intensive infra projects, because these are projects which take time to build and then time to pay off as well. So are you in a position to have enough cash on your books? Can you raise funds easily? And that is truly the only thing that you should look at. From that perspective as well, Sajid, I mean, would it be a fair assessment to say that the reason that the stocks have rebounded is not because people are emotional or sentimental? Market is not emotional or sentimental.
True.
Whatever you may feel on a very polarized subject, people put in money if they think that it's worth putting in money. I think the concerns, if any, about fundraising go away if the key promoters are not indicted under an FCPA.
That's true. It's not. We need to underline the fact that it's not just the promoters who are not named in the FCPA. None of the Adani companies have been named in the FCPA.
Yes. Yes,
right?
this is
So
what GQG
highlighted.
highlighted.
And it's part of the. If you go through the 54-page, indictment, none of the companies have been indicted, and the charges which are there are something which can be settled, as some of the lawyers on the channel came and spoke about. But one kind of fundamental fact you should always look at, and the infrastructure company is the kind of cash flows they are able to generate, and what is the kind of capex they plan, and this capex whether it can be taken care of by the existing cash flows. Most all Adani companies have a balance sheet which is very comfortable in terms of debt, except for Green, because Green has a bigger runway, and capex is initial.
And it's at the nascent stage,
nascent
right?
stage.
Green energy, solar power is relatively a newer
and a big
industry.
and a big they have a big ambition.
So I think what you should look at is the alignment with what the national policy is. National policy is to get into solar, to improve green energy, to increase air connectivity.
Yes.
So you have to see if the companies that you're investing are aligned with it, especially if you're looking at infrastructure play, because that becomes an important factor. All right, we have one more question saying, is it safe for purchase of Adani Green, which is directly impacted, and which Adani companies look attractive? Again, we are not going to give you
data part of it.
Yeah, we'll give you the data. We're not giving you
when
investment advice. You go ask your investment advisor, or of course, we have many shows where you have experts coming in, and we will pose these questions and you can hear what they're saying.
If the investors thought that before Wednesday these companies have good fundamentals, now many of these companies are available at 20-25 times cheaper today. Adani Energy, even today after a 10% jump, is 24% lower than Tuesday's close. Adani Green is 30% lower than Tuesday's close. So if these companies have good runway and capex in play and the cash flow coming in over a period of time, then it's available at a cheaper rate at this point in time for investors.
Yeah, so you take your own call. We're not going to tell you. I mean, a lot of investors have come, a lot of experts have come on NDTV Profit. You will find their quotes on our website, you'll find it on our channel, you'll find it on our YouTube channel. So go ahead and say what they are recommending before you make your call. But just one point that I wanted to make, because one of the questions is it safe? And if you look at it, Sajid, there are 2-3 ways of looking at this story. One is, of course, it's a hardcore news story. This is one of the biggest conglomerates in the country and has been subject to 2 quote-unquote attacks in the last year.
Yes.
Hindenburg, some recovery from there. There was a second attempt by Hindenburg, and then now you have this situation. So for investors, they're looking at, is it safe for me to invest? Why is this happening again and again? And
so the answer lies in whether you believe in India's infra story or not, right?
Yeah.
If you believe in India's infra story, and then you have to bet on India's infra players as well. And if you bet on India's players, then the answer is very clear, right?
And there are a lot of companies. So you choose which companies you want.
Names, but I'm talking about how investors should go about looking at, okay, I want to take my position or portfolio where infra plays a bigger role for me going forward.
So the larger story is India is a developing nation. It's a quickly urbanizing nation. It's a nation which is building more roads, ports, bridges, everything. We are in the building stage of our economy. So if you want to back that story, if you want to invest in that story, you have to identify companies which are in those businesses, suffice to say. But the point I was making was a different one, because we were speaking with Ashwin Dubey, who's a Supreme Court lawyer, and he made the point of retail investors. So did Mahesh Jetmalani in his press conference today, where he said that these might be malicious attacks, they could be political attacks, whatever the intent is. At the end, who suffers? It's the retail investors who suffer. And Ashwini Dubey went as far as to say that there should be a counter legal process against those who have been responsible for this kind of misrepresentation, because it hits investors. I mean, I don't know how that will play out, but that is something that you have to keep in mind while deciding about your investment, and also look at valuation. The point that Sajid made, that if this is the story you want, what is the valuation that these companies are available at versus the rest of the market or their peers, is one thing that you should look at, because obviously everyone gets into an investment for an upside.
True. And also the fact that these companies are sound and fundamental from a financial point of view. These are not startups. These are companies with huge assets. And if you look at the assets, the total group portfolio asset is around $60 billion, and they're looking at the kind of capex they're looking at. They want to take it to $100 billion by 2030. So there's a huge capex plan which is coming into
that
play.
is the other thing. There is an actual port and many. There's an actual airport and many. So there are actual assets there which you need to look at when you're making. Again, this is the third time I'm giving it in this